Good evening. I'd like to call November 1st, 2021 Wilson School Board meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Here.
Mrs. Casper? Here. Dr. Kennedy? Here. Mrs. Cocker? Here. Mr. Martin?
Here.
Mr. McCray?
Here.
Mr. Negrini?
Here.
Mr. Schneider?
Here.
Mr. Hart?
Here.
9 present, 0 absent.
Please stand for the pledge to the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Carroll, do we have participation on agenda items? Mr. Maravich, if you would like to.
My phone just closed, but the rules of participation for the Wilson School Board, pursuant to board policy and the Sunshine Law, there is a 3-minute opportunity to address the board on matters that are or may come before the board. There's 2 opportunities, and the first will be on agenda items, and the second will be on non-agenda items at the end of the meeting. All matters should be addressed to the board as a whole and not to any individual board members or administrators. There should be no clapping, calling out, or interference with the meeting in any way. At 1 minute, I will provide a warning. I keep the clock. I will not start the clock until the person's at the podium. At no time should anyone approach the desks. Everything should be done from the podium. And if at any time anyone interferes with the ordinary process of the meeting, they may be asked to leave by the board president.
Mrs. Cocker?
Okay, first, Jen Sarnes, CRT.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Over the past several months, we have heard opinions and perspectives on CRT from board members, district leadership, and a variety of community members. I would like to offer another perspective, that being one from a teacher. At the very beginning of the CRT debate, part of my curriculum was presented on social media and circulated in a flyer as proof that CRT is being taught in the Wilson School District. On one hand, I found this somewhat humorous because, 1, I had never even heard of CRT until it was brought up at a board meeting in May, and 2, if I truly had the power to indoctrinate students in something, I would indoctrinate them in turning in assignments on time, or perhaps in following directions the first time given so I would not have to repeat myself 847 times a day. On a more serious note, both the social media post and the flyer contain completely inaccurate information. The book was not a required text, but was one of several options students could choose. Additionally, no child or parent came to me or my colleague to ask about an alternative assignment, or even to express any concerns about the text. Yet the post and flyer stated that a request was made and denied, and even insinuated that the parent was disrespected by the teacher. While I would like to think that those responsible for the post and flyer were not malicious in their intent, I believe it is fair to say that the backlash from the community was upsetting, particularly when one considers that the information was not correct. I was shaken at having not only my professionalism called into question, but also my character and integrity. I would like to thank the district leadership team and the board for the support that they showed by reaching out to me directly to get the facts about my curriculum, rather than form judgments based on false information. From this experience, and in watching the events of the last few months, in which other teachers have had similar experiences, it seems to me that teachers and their curriculum have somehow become pawns in a political battle that we have no desire to be a part of, at all. I did not get into education to challenge others' political beliefs or sway others' political opinions. I became a teacher to help students become better readers, to help them love books.
1 minute.
And to understand that reading opens our minds to new perspectives and possibilities. I guess I would like to conclude with a heartfelt request to our awesome Wilson community. If you have a concern or question about an assignment, please reach out to your child's teacher directly. Give them an opportunity to explain the context of the assignment in question. As Mr. Schneider said a few weeks ago, context matters. Please don't assume that something you hear secondhand is gospel. This year is tough, probably the toughest year I've had in my 22 years of teaching. Our students need more from this year than ever, not just academically, but also emotionally and socially. Giving them all they need throughout the day is draining on teachers, but we gladly continue to give them all we've got because that's what we do. When you add on the stress of having to watch every word that comes out of your mouth for fear that it may be misconstrued, it is mentally and emotionally exhausting. Teachers are struggling under the strain, and I would hate to see our district lose any of its amazing teachers because they are disheartened and overwhelmed by suspicion and
wrap up.
mistrust. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dwight Wegman, Policy 832.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. Last meeting, we were presented with the revised equity policy. A few speakers pointed out that this is a policy without guardrails. Indeed, it is. An example was put forth about how the school would be forced to pay for all students to go on the recently approved annual Jamaica trip. Some may view this as a frivolous example, perhaps. However, without guardrails, this policy will generate more and more costs to satisfy the goals. If suit is brought by someone, the judge is not going to ask whether the school can pay for it or not. They will render their decision based on the wording of your policy that has no guardrails. This will assuredly translate into continual tax increases to everyone in the district. This policy still needs a lot of work. So let's talk about that a bit. Equity, as I have heard described to me in these meetings, means that everyone gets represented and an opportunity to realize the same outcome. So how does equity play out with elderly residents in this district who live on fixed incomes? We had a 5.6% tax increase this year. Further tax increases are sure to come from this equity policy as written. Do you think that is an equitable outcome for those struggling to make ends meet? During this election campaign, I have knocked on many doors. I can tell you that there are struggling homeowners within walking distance of this very room who are not doing well financially. I hear their stories. I see the condition of some of their homes. Has this board walked the community? Do you know how all of the constituents are doing? For them, these tax increases are not just an inconvenience. They can mean the difference of whether they can stay in their home or not. And how about the economically challenged that this policy is supposed to help? Are they immune from the tax and rent increases that this policy will bring? What kind of added economic hardship is this equity policy going to bring upon the very ones it's supposed to help? So again, I ask the members of this board and community members who advocate for this equity policy as written, is that how equity is supposed to work? In all of these discussions about equity, no one seems to care about those who foot the bill. Well, I am representing them tonight. This is just one of the many reasons we need change on this board, and that change begins tomorrow. We can all agree on equality of opportunity for our children. What we cannot tolerate is spending other people's money like we're playing a Monopoly game. Win or lose tomorrow, we will continue to be a presence at these meetings, to be the conscience to this board, and see that the entire community's interests are represented, and not just special interests or personal agendas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan Hefner, Equity.
Hello. I have two things I want to address tonight. First of all, I wrote a letter this past week to the editor supporting the incumbent board members and addressing a PAC supporting one of the writing candidates. The following day, a correction was made because a writing candidate made a response to my letter saying the support from 1776 Project PAC was not monetary and it was unsolicited. To be clear, I never said either of these things about the support, from the 1776 Project PAC. I did state the problems I see with this PAC and noted the mailer was paid for by the PAC. I will admit I should have used plural nouns, I'm sorry, when speaking of the roughly $27,000 in donations, because that was given to these write-ins, and the money was largely from 2 political action committees. So aside from these changes to include the plural nouns, I stand by my letter. The fact that the mailer donation was unsolicited to me makes no difference at all. If someone put my name on a mailer that I did not agree to, I would for sure do something about it. Again, I absolutely support the 4 incumbents. I don't like doing this. Secondly, as a matter of public record, I would like to read a part of a letter I wrote to the school board after 2 public meetings in August. I retired from Wilson Southern after working part-time in the then computer lab for 15 years. One of the most impressive projects I saw during that time was the 6th grade project of the reading classes done on the Holocaust.
1 minute.
It was a lengthy project involving reading books, viewing films, and research done by the students on people imprisoned in the concentration camps. A Holocaust survivor came to speak, and finally there was an open house where students presented their research for parents and visitors to see. Visitors could ask questions. Students stood in front of their report. It was a great project. The project was done for many years. And I would love to see projects like that done in like things in our own history, which maybe such things are done in American history classes, I don't know. One of the important takeaway sayings of the Holocaust is never again. We have things in our own country's history that have the same takeaway. Let's not have more generations pass without understanding Juneteenth, Black Wall Street, Reconstruction, and so much more. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ingrid Olson Powers, Equity.
Good evening. After the past few weeks and months of speaking at these school board meetings in support of the equity policy by sharing parts of our issues that we have experienced or my husband's family have experienced while living in the district for 33 years. I may not like or agree with everyone's beliefs, but I still listen to your viewpoints and want to work together to find a middle ground. A lot of the opposing side does not even want to find a middle ground. It's their way or no way. It has been beyond depressing to come to these meetings and hear the hateful comments or feel the negative energy. The only thing that gives me peace is knowing that we have a great community of supporting families in our community. I don't understand the issues with teaching our children critical thinking and how to discuss current issues. Some adults are having to take these classes at their employment because they still don't know how to think critically. I also don't understand the fear or harm in teaching our children factual history that we may not have been taught when we were in school. It isn't about race, as a lot seem to make it. Race and immigrants is what a lot of the opposing side brings up. But my dad was an immigrant, and he's white and Swedish. My dad didn't become a U.S. citizen until I was an adult. All I am asking, based off my family's experiences, which, yes, are race-related, is that we finally teach our children all of our history so that we can learn from it and not repeat it. I want our children to build a better tomorrow and learn how to be diverse and able to think critically. Some parents of high school students expressed at the board meeting that their children were bullied and teachers were arguing their beliefs. I do not agree with children who have different beliefs from the rest being singled out and argued with and try to change their beliefs. Every child should express their beliefs and then discuss why each feel that the way that they do. We are never all going to think one way. Life would be boring, but we need to learn and understand our feelings and peers or we will never move forward. We have all been learning about this stuff forever, just not all of it, or to this magnitude.
1 minute.
It isn't to make one person feel bad or slighted, but to show us why certain groups feel the way that they do and how we can come together with our different beliefs and grow. If we continue to suppress or ignore this, we are only setting our children up for failure and being behind the current times. Thank you.
Thank you.
Victor Talata, Equity Policy.
I'd like to take the opportunity to address comments that those with concerns over the equity policy are somehow against teaching history. I'm unaware of anyone against objectively teaching U.S. history from multiple perspectives. For instance, students should learn Woodrow Wilson, our district's namesake, implemented segregation through the federal bureaucracy and held a screening of The Birth of a Nation in the White House. Students should be taught about the complex lives of our founding fathers and that the Declaration of Independence promotes natural law and the notion that all men are created equal. Teach the good and the bad, but leave the politics out of it. The classroom must not be a venue for indoctrinating students that the U.S. is an irredeemably racist country whose government must be replaced in favor of a socialist utopia. This is the view held by many who preach equity over equality. We would be less divided if the focus was on our founding ideals, which haven't always been practiced, but have always guided us in the right direction when followed, and are worthy of being aspired to. I'm deeply concerned the latest equity policy proposal is a Trojan horse for implementing the remedies that CRT adherents seek. One can expect the diversity, equity, and inclusion position suggested in the latest revision of the policy will be from the educational equity industry with an ability to see racism in all things. If this is a new position, we can expect well over $100,000 in annual salary and benefits, plus the cost of conducting audits and then transforming the district to correct for the so-called systemic issues that will be identified. Then there is the concern of, quote, prioritizing the principle of educational equity through the allocation of resources and opportunities based upon each individual student's needs, unquote. Who determines what a student needs? A parent, student advocate, or lawyer with carte blanche? At best, this seems like a taxpayer-funded redistribution scheme. Any teacher worth their salt already connects with students and provides a degree of individualized education.
1 minute.
Prioritizing equity based on an individual's unlimited needs over ensuring equality of opportunity is irresponsible without guardrails and without an anti-CRT resolution. There is an election tomorrow. Please get out and vote for the write-in candidates who are against CRT and the equity policy as it's written, who support parents' rights when it comes to choosing masks and vaccination, and who will demonstrate fiscal responsibility.
Thank you.
Val Delp, equity policy.
Good evening, and thank you all for your time and patience during these longer than usual meetings the past few months. Tonight, I wanted to attempt to provide my insight on a common misconception presented here. We've sat here meeting after meeting listening to those pushing the narrative that those of us raising objections don't want an equity policy at all. But I'm going to make the argument that we are actually more pro-equity than those that believe the proposed policy is perfect as is. First of all, we do want equal treatment and opportunities for students of every race, gender, LGBTQ, religion, family background, and socioeconomic status. I never once stood up here and said otherwise. My request has always been for equity to also apply to family values and political beliefs. If you're going to allow personal political beliefs to be woven into the curriculum by your own policy, you should have to allow for equal treatment of those with opposing views. Otherwise, you cannot truly have equity. And if you disagree with that, then you don't want equity for all, only for those that align with your beliefs. And let me be clear, I've never said don't teach about politics or the ugly truths of our history at all. We absolutely should. It is the way in which those things are being presented without also teaching the ways in which we have made progress that have many in the community upset. And all the time spent walking the community and talking with people these last few weeks, we've had so many great conversations with people from varying walks of life, races, family backgrounds, etc. We've spoken with interracial families, witnessed many instances of kids of multiple races playing together in their neighborhoods, and had some very productive and meaningful conversations around what families feel is appropriate or not appropriate for their children to be learning in school. Have any of you made the effort to do this? Do you really have a true understanding of how the community feels as a whole, outside of the few representatives that have voiced their concerns here? Because I've gotten a pretty good sense of it. And while I realize we will never all completely agree on certain issues, I think it is important to be able to have respectful dialogue and work together, rather than shutting out those who think differently. Regardless of what happens tomorrow, I will always be on the side of all the children in this community and will continue to represent this community and the concerns they have brought here. Wilson has always been a valued school district that has placed an importance on excellence. I hope we can work together to continue to uphold that reputation.
Thank you.
Michael Kaminskis, agenda, second reading of policy.
Since I normally bust my 3-minute limit, I'm going to be very pointed tonight. When I look at first reading versus second reading, I only looked at 006 meetings. There were no changes except for changing first to second and changing the date. I made comments last meeting about majority vote and the improper definition used in the policy. Today, I decided, with the 6 hours I had available, to provide a complete review of 006. I could not finish in 6 hours. That's how many disconnects I found in the document. So I have no idea why you have a first and second or third reading if nothing is going to be changed or updated from the comments provided to you. I will try for the next meeting to have a complete dissection of all, or at least some of the policies. But I have a recommendation. When I was in 7th and 8th grade, the 7th grade new math class graded the 8th grade new math class test, and vice versa. Why don't you hand out your policies at first reading to the English honors and advanced placement classes for extra credit to review to find all disconnects? Thank you.
Sir, my email address is on the website. Feel free to email your comments to me, and I'll be glad to take a look at them.
Jeff Janakovo, equity policy, process and creation.
Oh, crap. Statement's back there. All right. Apologies. So raise your hand if you feel teachers at Wilson are not racist. Raise your hand if there were racist teachers at Wilson, our administration would handle it. So now that we've got common ground, let's discuss the summation of Equity Task Force video response answers to this question. What has been your experience with race or racism at Wilson? Student summation. Racism at Wilson seems to be more student to student. Racist ideas or statements being used in a joking manner. The N-word is being used, but it isn't used in a demeaning way. Some indication of blatant racism, but again, mostly student to student. Teacher summation. Staff was passive-aggressive in some comments. Fewer than expected said there was racism. Students do not understand the term racism. This also applies to our staff. Surprised that they see student-to-student racism, but not teacher-to-student racism. So is this person who summarized these answers looking for racism? Hoping for racism? What do they mean when they say fewer than expected said there is racism? Is that not the very definition of race baiting? Were they actually expecting more teachers to admit they were racist? Were they really suggesting that our teachers do not understand the term and definition of racism? This policy has issues when you have leadership so unable to address equity without leading with race, because this body has told us that equity has nothing to do with race. Major issues when a board member on the Equity Task Force Committee credits their awakening in education to race. What an insult to those teachers who inspired that person to pursue a career in education. This board's been asked by its own members repeatedly to focus on problematic areas, to ID the problems, and I shared some of those with you last meeting. Why do we not start there? Why does this Equity Task Force Committee share so little with the board at large? I've heard that committees in this very room are to do the work and bring the findings to the board.
1 minute.
It's abundantly clear that all the information is not being shared. The Equity Task Force doesn't keep minutes of their meetings, so how would any board member be able to properly adopt this policy? Even the inception of it's in question, with our superintendent signing an equity pledge prior to the formal beginnings and announcements of our own Equity Task Force Committee. And to be clear, for everyone in the room, the board creates policy. It doesn't respond to pledges signed by the administration to enact policy before a discussion has even been had or committees have been formed. From January to July of 2020, there were no BCIU reports on this topic, and then suddenly, in August of 2020, we learned of the BCIU anti-racism and equity statement that was signed by our superintendent. That is backwards. It is policy devoid of transparent and honest discussion. It's violated your own rules and the way policy's been incepted, built, debated, and adopted from the start. And it's for these reasons you're being challenged tomorrow at the polls.
President Hart, could I clarify something in the comments from Mr. Giacobo? That the sheet from the BCIU was signed by all 18 superintendents in the county, correct, Dr. Fadley?
That is correct.
Okay, next is Caroline Clark, CRT and Equity.
Hello. I'd like to address the misinformation about CRT and how it keeps getting incorrectly intertwined with equity. A parent left some school assignments on this very podium after the last meeting, and because I don't have a child in high school yet, I was curious to see what all the fuss was about. What I saw were assignments that are meant to teach kids critical thinking skills, not teachers pushing political agendas or doing anything nefarious. And just to be clear, critical thinking includes analysis, interpretation, inference, explanation, self-regulation, open-mindedness, and problem-solving, skills every child needs. An assignment asking students to learn to decipher and understand political cartoons simply serves to provide opportunities for students to give a more personal view of historical events, provide opportunities to develop critical thinking skills, and encourage building connections to the past or current events. It's certainly not CRT at work. People are arguing about something that isn't even taking place and are so quick to look at things and automatically assume that their personal views and beliefs are under attack. The blatant misinformation being spread is appalling and is a perfect example of individuals pushing their own political agendas, the very same thing those same individuals are accusing many of our school board members and teachers of doing. Our nation is already so fractured and divided. Why are people encouraging this in our schools? Our teachers, our administrators, our board members, our families already face enough challenges. Let's stop spreading misinformation and making assumptions. I saw a quote the other day at one of my child's sporting venues that said, "Teachers don't make you learn, trainers don't make you fit, coaches don't make you rich. At some point, you have to realize that other people can help you, but your growth is your responsibility." I think we can all benefit from improving our critical thinking skills. Kids need to learn to think for themselves. That's what school's all about, and why we teach them history, science, math, languages, civics, and more. If they wind up parroting their parents or politicians, then we have failed them. And we cannot fail them if we still believe in an ever brighter future, which is the reason I hope all of us are here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
R.G. Hansen, CRT.
Good evening. Tonight I'm going to be sharing from a document that was shared publicly and was put together by some district stakeholders who couldn't speak tonight. The truth matters. Critical race theory is a graduate level theory about racial structures in the United States that isn't being taught at Wilson or any K-12 school. Locally, CRT accusations started with Wilson's PA State Representative Jim Cox in his political newsletter in summer of 2021. He never spoke to Wilson administrators before writing that newsletter, and his non-research claims were found to be false, unconfirmed, and misleading. Most Wilson teachers did not know what CRT was, nor have they been teaching it. Discussions about race or racism during a lesson is a far cry from teaching CRT. In addition, Wilson teachers have been undergoing training for social emotional learning, or SEL. SEL programs are proven to be one of the most successful interventions that districts and schools can implement in terms of promoting positive development and academic achievement in K through 12 student populations. It also helps prevent bullying. Students are taught the knowledge and skills to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. SEL does advance educational equity, but it is not CRT. All curriculum at Wilson High School is public record. And last year, in 2018, they specifically rewrote the social studies curriculum, which is available for everyone to see. Furthermore, last year, while our students were online, learning their lessons from home, and many parents were there to listen, no complaints were being made about CRT. Social studies teachers are trained to present both sides of an issue. Politics and current events are discussed in school, not preached. History and English classes do use political cartoons to tackle tough issues. And political cartoons are, by design, one-sided. Again, that does not make them CRT. This curriculum is in adherence with the PA state curriculum, not something that staff has just decided to make up and throw out there for their own personal gain. We heard tonight from a teacher how having their curriculum and lessons put up out of context affects them. Mistrust is being encouraged. We are questioning the professionals that we should be holding in the very highest regard. I wonder if anyone here would find it acceptable for someone to come into their workplace and question them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Steph O'Brien, Equity.
Good evening. I stand before you tonight just to go over a few facts. I'm not much into fortune telling. We hear a lot of what can we expect, what if, have you ever. So I'm gonna just go through a few things here because the last few weeks I've heard some things that I was actually curious about, so I went and I looked them up. Pittsburgh Public High School published their policy on equity in 2018. To date, they don't have any lawsuits. Allentown Public Schools published their equity policy in 2017, and they have no lawsuits. The Hatboro-Horsham District in 2019, no lawsuits. Reading Public Schools, 2019, no lawsuits. Bethlehem Public Schools, 2017, no lawsuits. Easton Public Schools, 2016, no lawsuits. I have more, but I think you're going to get my point here. And I've also heard these four great incumbents challenged, but has anyone thought about what great things they've done? Wilson is 51 out of 711 schools in Pennsylvania, school districts. I think that's pretty phenomenal. And I think it's something that everybody should be proud of. They kept our school open during the pandemic, thank goodness. The kids needed it. And we do actually have one of the lowest tax rates in the county. They've provided our students with their best chance. Let us not forget the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting free exercise thereof, abridging freedom of speech, of the press, or the right of people to peaceably assemble. At the heart of this First Amendment is the recognition of the fundamental importance of the free flow of ideas and opinions on matters of public interest and concern. The freedom to speak one's mind is not only an aspect of
1 minute.
individual liberty and thus one's mind, it is an aspect of good unto oneself, but it is an essential to the common quest of truth. Thanks.
Thank you.
I have no more on agenda items.
Dr. Fadley. Yes, Mrs. Carroll.
Okay, one more, President Hart. Mary Turner, Equity.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mary Turner, and I have 3 children in the district. I want to thank the board for the hours of precious time you've sacrificed with your own family for the Wilson School District. I want to come here tonight to be one more taxpayer, community member, and Wilson parent who supports an equity policy. I care. That's why I'm here. I just care. Not just for my own kids, but others' kids. And I want my kids to care about others. And I realize the best way to do that is to grow up in a district that is diverse and equitable and science and data driven and just better. I just want to do what I can to make it better because so much of life is hard and it's even harder for so many more. When my husband and I were looking for a new home, we deliberately and selfishly wanted our children to be surrounded by a diverse student population. I wanted to know that the district where my kids would attend school not only had a great academic rigor for those who would statistically do well regardless of the district they were in, but I wanted to know how well the district was doing with the demographic of students who statistically had barriers to academic proficiency. I looked at the percentage of students who were proficient and had an IEP, received free and reduced lunch, were second language learners, were Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and compared that to the general school population. I found Wilson to have the least gaps, the highest proficiency across all demographics than any other district in the area. But hear what I say, the least gaps and the highest proficiency. I know that there's a lot of work to be done. I want that to continue to be led by many of the individuals before me, the 4 that are already on the ballot tomorrow and have already done the work. I will vote for you because of your experience, your expertise, and because you have moved the district forward and made us even better.
1 minute.
Are we, as a district, perfect? No. I have a lot of my own gripes. But I will vote for you because you had the vision and the courage to strive for an equity policy to make Wilson even better for every child. Equity is not new. Equity is the reason we have IEPs and GIEPs. Equity is the reason no child is denied a lunch at school. Equity is the reason we have English as a second language supports in place. Equity is the reason we have guidance counselors and libraries. Equity, like many more civilized concepts that have unfortunately had a slow evolution, is the work to continue to get it more and more right, more and more humane. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hart, may I make an announcement?
Yes, you may.
The owner of the Honda Acura, license plate GBE 470, your lights are on.
Dr. Fadley, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. I wanted to take this opportunity to address our community prior to the start of the business portion of our board meeting this evening. We are grateful to our community and staff for your participation in our board meetings. The strength of the Wilson community is in the passion that our families have for school and for our students. I do want to provide a gentle reminder to our families that if you have a school-related issue with your child, we have an established line of communication that will allow you to bring those concerns to our attention so we can address them in an expedited manner. If you have a question or concern about something in a classroom, please allow your child's teacher the courtesy of contacting them first. If you're unable to find a resolution, it is appropriate at that time to contact the building principal. Finally, if the issue remains unsolved, it is then appropriate to contact my office to schedule a conversation. While we may not always agree on every topic, I hope that we can all agree that it is our collective goal to help each of our students realize our stated mission to empower our students to create their own future. Thank you, Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Dr. Fadley. The board did not meet in executive session since our last meeting. Looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the school board meeting held on October 18th, 2021 as attached.
So moved.
Mr. Martin first, do you have a second?
Second case.
Mr. Case, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Payment of bills, Mr. Martin.
Yes, Mr. President, I submit for payment tonight bills in the amount of $1,442,275.98.
Thank you. We have a first, do we have a second?
McCray, second.
Mr. Schneider, second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Superintendent's report, Dr. Fadley.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. This evening, I present the personnel and program recommendations as listed.
Looking for a motion to approve superintendent items 4.1 to 4.8 as presented.
Cocker?
Mrs. Cocker first, do you have a second?
Case, second.
Mr. Case, second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Ratification and approval of the following field trips. Mrs. Cocker.
Request permission to approve a trip to Costa Rica for approximately 24 students in Spanish 3, 4, and 5 from April 1st to April 10th, 2022. 6 days out of school. Cost of students is approximately $3,980. The cost of the district is one substitute for 6 days. Students will be chaperoned by Ms. Lilibel Sanchez and Mr. Ramon Marquez. Trip insurance and health insurance will be required for all students traveling.
Thank you. I'm looking for a motion.
So moved.
Case. Mr. Case first, do I have a second?
Casper?
Mrs. Casper, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Consent items. Mrs. Cocker.
Request to accept with gratitude the following donations. From South Berks Association of School Retirees, 3 $100 Target gift cards to be given to one senior high student and one student at each of the middle schools whose families are in need of assistance. In memory of Leo Kohler, to be placed in the General Athletics Fund to be used for the betterment of the Wilson Athletics Program. From West Lawn Beverage Company, a check in the amount of $50. From Matthew and Kimberly Kramer, a check in the amount of $50.
Looking for a motion to approve the consent items.
So moved, Schneider.
Mr. Schneider first, do I have a second?
McCray.
Mr. McCray, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Under Student Services, 7.1, request approval of a resolution approving and adopting a student discipline waiver and consent agreement. 7.2, looking to request approval of the service agreement with Dr. Lisa Hain to perform an independent educational evaluation at a fee not to exceed $4,500 in accordance with Board Policy 113.3. Looking for a motion to approve Student Services agenda items 7.1 and 7.2 as presented.
Casper?
Mrs. Casper first, do we have a second?
Cocker?
Mrs. Cocker, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
Technology and Media, 8.1, request permission to enter into a one-year agreement with the Berks County IU to purchase 6,000 DocuSign electronic envelopes to enable electronic signatures of the district. 8.2, request approval to renew a contract with Lincoln Intermediate Unit IU-12 for E-rate consultating services for the E-rate fiscal year 2022. Looking for a motion to approve technology and media agenda items, 8.1, 8.2 as presented.
Schneider, so
Mr.
moved.
Schneider first, do you have a second?
McCray.
Mr. McCray, I'm sorry, second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Finance, 9.1, request permission to create a Southern Junior Family Career and Community Leaders of America, FCCLA, club and establish a student activity account in the Southern Middle School Student Activities Fund. 9.2, request permission to create a Club International and establish a Student Activity Fund account in the High School Student Activities Fund. Looking for a motion to approve items 9.1 and 9.2 as presented.
So moved. Case?
Mr. Case first, do you have a second?
Cocker?
Mrs. Cocker, any discussion?
Yes, Mr. President, is there any cost to the school for this?
Dr. Gately? Is there a cost to the school for this?
For the setting up of the number 9.1?
Not for the creation of the account.
No, no.
Raising funds, so we use that account as a
Okay, so do we, is this, let me back up for a second. So when did we approve this committee already? I might be missing this. Did we approve this club? I mean, did we approve this club at a, yeah, somebody help me here.
Sure, Mr. Martin. The club is a club that's ongoing at the high school. This is taking that opportunity and affording it to students at Southern Middle School. This particular advisor has agreed to do it for no compensation.
Okay, that's, okay.
However, this creates a fund where students can deposit money that they raise throughout the year to do their different activities.
You answered the question.
Yeah.
We have a first and a second. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Policies, Mrs. Cocker.
Second reading of the following new and/or revised policies: 006, meetings; 218.2, weapons or their replicas; 218.3, terroristic threats or acts; 236.1, threat assessment; 247, hazing; 249, bullying or cyberbullying; 251, homeless students; 805, emergency preparedness and response; 805.2, school security personnel; 832, educational equity.
Thank you. Those will be available for third read at the next meeting. Under committee reports.
Well, no, we
Mr.
have
Hart.
comment period.
Okay, Mr. Martin.
Don't forget comments. First, before we actually read the whole document line by line, because I have comments on almost every sentence, I do want to, for the people out there, especially for the ones that, when I was speaking last time, some of you here were, kind of squirming, making faces at me. I offered, talk to you after the meeting. I went up to you, see if you want to talk. And you said, no, I don't want to talk to you. So that's very disrespectful, because everybody thinks they're right. So there's got to be a situation where you have to have some respect. But let's talk about how we got to this policy today. Well, the policy basically started, or as a result, shortly after, when George Floyd, his death caused most of this to occur. There was calls for disbanding the police. There was riots. There was all sorts of things that prompted this policy to be written. And the policy was written and generated by the National School Board Association. The National School Board Association is an extremely left-leaning organization, so much so that the Pennsylvania School Board Association backed out of that organization a couple weeks ago. So the situation we have is, it's not about equity, it's about how we got here. The policy, as written, is vague, is very costly. It has somebody mentioned about guardrails. It's not what I would consider a well-written document. In fact, it's so poorly written that defined terms aren't even defined in the document, which is surprising for all the attorneys that have looked at this document, that the defined terms aren't defined. So the PSB, was in bed with the National School Board Association. We got this policy. Unfortunately, the policy was a knee-jerk reaction to a situation, and unfortunately, we're dealing with that today. I said, there's nobody in this room that's going to argue about equity. It's how we're trying to do it. So now we have a policy that the community really isn't sure of, or doesn't really even understand. We have people speaking about it. And has any board member or community member show where Wilson has failed in meeting our objectives of equity throughout our district? I haven't heard a single one, but yet we need a policy. Well, and I'll talk, Amy, I know you have a question. I just saw your facial reactions. I'll let you speak. We pay millions of dollars in salaries to administration staff. I would think equity would be part of their decision-making process. So why do we have to hire outside experts to come in and tell us what our administration should be doing? Where's the gap there? To me, that's a serious problem then with our quality of our administrators. We hire experts. What do experts do? And we pay for them, and so forth and so on. Oops, I'm losing my spot here. So I'm just going to go over a couple of things about experts, and these come from Colin Powell. One thing you said, don't be buffaloed by experts that need lights. Experts often possess more data than judgment. Elites can become so in bed that they produce hemophiliacs who bleed to death as soon as they're nicked by somebody that has opposing them. Number two, don't be afraid to challenge the pros, even in your own backyard. Organization charts and hence have titles count for nothing in the real world. Fit no stereotypes. Don't chase the latest management fads. The situation dictates what approach is best, the team's approach and mission. And my favorite is what I live by. Being responsible sometimes means pissing people off. There's nothing wrong with that. Let me continue here. I won't speak too much longer. As for the committee, this board stands by the fact that the committee that was put together was a nonpartisan or a non-biased thing. The process used, unless you live in the education world, and if you're in the business world, it was so flawed that we had, in that room that night, almost 70-75% raw educators. How did that happen? Well, the questions were wrong. When we run for election, we're not asked questions. We're not asked, why are you running? You get 10 votes and you're on that application and you can run for. But here we had questions. We asked them, what does equity mean to you? We had other questions, final comments. Well, I'm a teacher. I'm this, I'm that. You were automatically, the process automatically chose the committee. And that's how you got so many people on the committee. And I suggested we throw all the names in a bucket, pull names out, and then that would be, to me, a fair approach doing it. There's no possible collusion between board members, because the way it was written is easy to pick out who these people were. It was not a difficult process, especially on the second part of that where we invited the community, where most of those unfortunately became teachers. And once again, it's not about the teachers, it's about the process. The process was flawed. No matter how you can try to defend it or define it, it was not done correctly. So we really didn't have a really good, and the bottom line, we spent 2 hours. 2 hours with that committee, and they came up and approved this very complicated document they approved in 2 hours, or less than 2 hours. And even the board president in conversation, suggested that it was not probably the best process. It was flawed.
I disagree with you, Mr. Martin.
You do? You don't remember the phone call when I said that there's some of those things were biased and they're racist? You disagree with that?
What I said and what I.
And what did you also say? That maybe we should have considered that. Did you not?
Can you give me an answer to get your question, give me time to answer your question? I agreed with you that there was not committee representation from the community. I gave that information to Dr. Fadley, which he can agree to, if he wants to, doesn't have to. That's what I agreed with you, Mr. Martin. I did not agree with you on anything else other than we needed representation from the community, and we did that.
Didn't you say that some of those people should not have been on that list?
Absolutely not. There are people.
Then you're lying.
You're
lying.
I'm ready to talk to you now. I'm not
I
going to debate this here.
don't tolerate liars.
Well, Mr. Martin, I'm not going to debate it
And
here.
why
We
would you
can
give it
talk.
to the superintendent? What power does he have? This is the board. The board makes decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Can we allow Mr. Martin to finish his comment, and then we can move on with the rest of our
As
meeting?
for the committee, there's 44,000 people in our Wilson School District. You had a group of 18 make these decisions. I'm not going to, this might really upset some people, so I'll let that one go.
Why?
Worst of all, I think, in education, there seems to be a gap between what is ethical, just because it's legal, it's not ethical. And it's it's by law, you can do this. We have teachers on the school board. Is that legal? Surely. Is it ethical? I don't know. That's up to the people to decide. And a big problem is with this stuff that happened after George Floyd, as everybody knows, read the papers, from CNN to Fox to the papers. Most of these issues where, police forces had to be disbanded, guess what? Crime's up 37 to 40% in these cities. Cities from Portland to Chicago now going back and changing those. Why? Because it was knee-jerk reaction. In closing, with this, before I start talking about the policy itself, I think an equity policy is needed. Do we have proof that we have issues at Wilson? Not been documented. Do we need to hire, quote, experts to tell us there's something wrong when we're paying millions of dollars to the administrators? I'm not sure that's in the best interest of the community. And I'm going to just say one more thing. Above all, this is a quote, I don't have this. Unfortunately, the quote is unknown. It says, above all, people know instinctively that there has to be trust in any organization that's going to work. Yet organizations need trust if they're not going to clutter themselves up with rules, checks, and checkers. Too much time is spent in organizations making sure what should happen is happening. If people know what they have to do and are competent to do so, they should be left alone to get it done. Obviously, we have no trust in administration or we wouldn't be imposing such rules on them. Thank you. Now,
Mr. Martin, thank you for your conversation. I do disagree with some things, and we're going to agree to disagree. Your record speaks for itself, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
now are we going to go over this line by line?
We need to. That's what
Okay.
second reading is about.
All right.
Before
Okay.
you start, Mr. Martin, I'd just like to say that I take exception to, over here, to one point. Of the dates of the equity policies that were read earlier, most of those predated the George Floyd incident. This trying to conflate that equity policies are all tied to George Floyd, I think, is a bit of a stretch.
And that's a good comment. What I was trying, I didn't communicate very clearly. What I was saying, this all was not forced, but brought about by that unfortunate incident, and it's a mar on our society.
So
However,
PSBA issued their statement on equity in 2018. Floyd died in 2020.
No, I know, okay, we're not, but we're,
I would like to concur on that because we had been meeting on the equity committee and we had talked about a policy prior to that. I was there. I'd also like to remind you that I gave you statistics several times about summer school and the disparity of the students
that are in credit recovery versus the disparity in the students who are in advanced placement for summer school. And for me, that is a huge red flag. I'd also like to say about experts. I'm wondering if you want to perform your own surgery or surgery on your wife, because last time I checked, doctors are experts. I know there's a large contingent, in this room that don't believe what doctors say and are anti-science, but I believe in experts. Do you want to get a separate opinion? Absolutely. Do you want to get a separate? Yes, I want to get a second. Oh, no. My second thought is about a lawyer. There's this saying, a man who is his own lawyer has a fool for his client. There's a reason we have experts. And I'm not saying I'm not saying we need an equity expert. I don't know if we do at this point, but I think to disparage people who are true experts in our field is a very dangerous thing to do. The last thing I want to remind you again of is that we had 51 parent applicants. We only had 12 community applicants. And we, as a board, got to appoint, through a point system, these applicants. If you chose to get into cahoots with another board member and use all of your points on just 2 of those applicants, that's on you. That was your choice. The way it was done was as fair as it could be.
All right, now I want to review some of those things. First of all, you're comparing a doctor to somebody that has a PhD in a non-medical field. I would never trust myself to somebody other than a doctor, but when you get people that sit in ivory towers and think in these think tanks and come up with all this stuff, these people have more letters behind their name but have no practical experience in the real world. So comparing a doctor to a doctor, 2 different things. And as for your statement about, once again, figures don't lie, but liars figure. You can change any figure any way to represent. You talked about those 400 some kids. Do we know the details of those 400 kids? They come from a single family. They come from a broken home. Do they have any children in the school? Have they been here or were they transferred in? All these things are relative.
And I want you to know that I asked Dr. Trickett and Mr. Campbell for figures exactly like that, and I'm still waiting for that.
What I'm saying, but you made a statement without data. You made a statement.
I gave you the data.
Mr. Martin, you do have the floor.
I mean, I guess because I come from a different world, I understand what you're saying, but you gave a number without knowing the background of that data. You don't present data without knowing the information that supports that data. So just because those additional kids were in that class, but they could all, hypothetically, they could all transferred in 2 days before that. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Making comments without supporting information is very dangerous. And yes, about getting back to the 2018, we just, if you look back, we just revised our policy in 2020. And then what I was trying to say, and I didn't do it very clearly, with all that happened with the George Floyd, we had to revise the policy. But did we really have to? We just did it in 2000. So that's why I was trying to key. I'm not trying to say, and I'm getting kind of self-confused between the 2 comments now, but I think I answered them all. And Bob, what I was trying to say, and I didn't mean it to be disrespectful, Bob, but I'm almost in purgatory here, surrounded by 8 people that are all educated backgrounds. It's very difficult for me to sit here and try to come to, somebody said there's no way of coming to common ground. Well, it's very difficult for me when I have 8 people, if you count the superintendent 9, always talking about the same thing over and over and over again without having documented proof of where we went wrong at Wilson. Nobody's ever said that. Nobody's ever told me. I know, Amy, you gave us those numbers, and I appreciate that. That's one piece of the pie. And there's, okay, I'm done. Let's go work on the policy.
Dr. Kennedy, thank you for.
I'm sorry.
You may continue.
Mr. Hart, may I make a comment, please?
Yes, may.
I just want to go back to things that I've said over the course of time. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion on whatever comes before the board. I think what is important is that we treat each other with respect. So I will say to my administration, I think you are of superb quality and that you do your job tirelessly and for the betterment of students in this district. I would also say that of our professional staff and our support staff. We all come to work with one goal, and it's to do our absolute best for the students that we serve. So I do take offense to some of the statements that were made this evening. But even though I take offense to it, I respect the right of individuals to make those comments. Doesn't mean that I agree with them. I do not agree with them.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey.
Let's follow up on that since you spoke. Once again, I respect you in education, but once again, you have blinders on. You don't want to dwell into the weeds, as I would say. And if we really want to get into the weeds, I can get into the weeds. But I think I'm above that, but if you push me too hard, I will say things that nobody should hear. So let's just leave it go at that, and let's talk about this policy. All right, so the purpose, okay? It says, equity through allocation of resources and opportunities based on each individual student's needs. Okay, so resources. How much resources? Where's it end? Is it $1 million? Is it 100,000? I don't know. And it talks also about, I talked about defined terms. If you go back to, for the folks that have that in front of them, if you go back to definitions, wherever there's a definition, barriers, calls for proficiency, it should be bolded in this document so people can refer back to what it's trying to say. It's very difficult, but that's called a defined term. John knows what that is. So that needs to be cleaned up. So let's go back to definitions now, which really are the meat of this document. It's not so much the policy, it's the meat of the document. So
Just, as you know, this is board-driven. You just want where the term is there. The definitions are like on that second page. So you just want, if it's a defined term, you want to make it bold when it's first mentioned? Is that what you're saying?
right, so you can refer back to the, you know that. Where was I? Hold on here. So, you know, sometimes I get myself upset here, and I shouldn't, but I do. I take this stuff too seriously. But okay, under okay. The allocation, educational. Okay, so we have educational equity. Educational shall mean the allocation that talks about resources based on each individual student's needs. What is that? Is it, are you going to try to make a C student an A student? Are you going to spend an unlimited amount of sums? But basically what it's saying is each kid will have an IEP. Equitable resources include funding, programs, policies, initiatives, and supports that are informed by each student's unique background and circumstances. Okay, so that's an unfunded mandate. Properly identifying barriers, and this one is interesting, properly identifying and addressing barriers that create achievement or opportunity gaps. Am I reading that correctly? Properly identifying and addressing barriers that create achievement? Does that make sense to everybody? Maybe it's just me.
Achievement and/or opportunity gaps.
All right.
Achievement gaps and/or opportunity gaps.
That create achievement gaps. Well, okay. Maybe it could be spelled out a bit better for me. I'm a little slow tonight. Here's one. On number one, we're going to go down promptly, if we talked about that. Number one, here's where I have an issue. We talked about the fairness of the committee. This particular one, I sat at the table. I think one of you is still here. I sat at that table that came up with this. 6 people came up with this. And the thing that I have with this is, there's no other board, subcommittee, I'm sorry, If it's a subcommittee, that's different, but a committee, there's no committee on this board, excuse me, that has parents or community members on it.
Mike, where are you at? I'm trying to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Page 1, number 1.
Thank you.
So what I'm trying to say is, to be respectful for all committees, either you have broadened this, I mean, if we're going to do this for a committee, unless it's a subcommittee that reports to the committee, that's one thing. But if you have a committee that has, you know, parents, community staff, students, everybody on, why doesn't the facilities, why doesn't the finance, why don't all the other committees have that on? I don't think that's, I think it's not appropriate as written. Well, school leaders will examine the equity practice and procedures. There's nothing wrong with that, but how do you do that? I don't know. Survey, it says survey districts draft to determine the needs and potential biases. Potential biases. Well, if you start reading history, and some of the people spoke at the last meeting, they started reading history about the Tulsa riots and different things. Well, you're going to read that, aren't you going to become somewhat biased by just reading that? Trying to put your place in their position 100 years ago? We'll talk more about that later under other stuff. Then on number 5, we talked about identifying opportunities to promote educational career pathways within our own community. I'm not sure what that means. I mean, everything is so ambiguous. It sounds nice, gives everybody that warm, fuzzy feeling, but being an auditor and CPA, I have issues with things that are too ambiguous. And I guess one of the things that I talked about was the definitions, but the thing, excuse me, the talk about hiring folks to help us with this, hiring an inclusion officer. That was done once again by a table surrounded, and I'm not trying to downgrade anything, or I'm saying to speak negatively, but when you have educators sitting around a table, what do you think they're going to come up with? Pretty much the same thing. So you have a situation where if you have more of a, I'm going to say independent because nobody's really independent, including myself, you have more of a neutral presentation. I think some of this policy could have been handled in a much better fashion. And as the superintendent, I was not in any way suggesting that the administration failed us, because I think they did a good job, because I don't believe that Wilson has done anything other than perform equity within our school district. Now, there's some comments I made, just like last week. I'm sure none of them are going to be picked up, but I had to say it. Thank you.
Any other discussion of policies?
President Hart?
Yes.
Okay, so a couple things to kind of feed off of what Mr. Martin said. One thing I think that's important to remember is that just because we're working on an equity policy, and we're working on passing the things in this policy, we're not doing this because there is necessarily like a list of 20 problems. Specifically in this policy, it says, the pursuit of educational equity requires the continuous and collaborative effort of identifying various aspects of district programs and operations in which consideration of educational equity shall be analyzed, incorporated, and prioritized. Continuous and collaborative effort. This isn't something that we're trying to put into place because we have issues today. Obviously we do. Dr. Kennedy has come up with even a couple in the past. And that's what, in the policy, there's also an audit to see specifically what are gaps or barriers that we are currently not addressing. The point here is that it's continuous and collaborative effort moving forward as well. So we don't know what the future brings, and our goal with this equity policy is to take care of what situations and what barriers exist today, and moving forward, that we are going to continue to have equity as a centerpiece of our education. Another thing, and I agree with you, if we don't have parents and community members currently on committees, then I'm sure that would be a discussion point that we could have a subcommittee where students and parents and community members discuss different things that they have noticed in our schools related to equity and take that back to the equity committee. I don't think that's anything that would be out of the realm of possibility. Number 5, So you said it was within the community, right? Number 5, Part C. Is that correct? Identify, oh, right, B. Thank you, Mr. McCray. Identify opportunities to promote educational career pathways within our own community and within the student body in order to foster a strong pool of future teacher candidates. I have a very good example of that. So one of the issues, I believe, is that some people have an issue with the idea of hiring people with diverse backgrounds from what we currently have, and that the issue is, well, we want somebody that's most qualified, also assuming that that person with a diverse background wouldn't be the most qualified, which I have issue with. But obviously, we're going to pick the candidate that is most qualified, and we do have a lack of diversity in the teacher pool from which to pull from. In our high school, we have a program called SIA, Student Instructional Assistants or Student Instructional Aides. I was one when I was at Wilson, because I've known since probably 3rd grade that I wanted to be a teacher. And so I was in the SIA program. So there's one part within our own community, in our own school, where we can look at that program specifically and say, how many students of color and how many students with other diverse backgrounds are in that program within our own school district? And can we do more to encourage students to participate in that program and to find possibly that they enjoy working with children and want to go into the education system? And then we've created our own little pipeline within our own district. Because I guarantee that if you take a look at the teachers in our Wilson School District, a good percentage of them also were Wilson students. And they stay in Wilson because it's a great community and they want to raise their families here, and they want to teach in a system where they learned how to be a teacher and how to love education. So that's one specific example of something that we can do with this equity policy in place and in mind. It's just, this policy is not a Band-Aid to fix a problem we have right now. Yes, it's to look at all of the issues and barriers that exist, and to dive deeper and make sure that we're hitting all the gaps that we can, but it's also something that we're putting in place to make sure moving forward that we're taking all of those things into consideration with student success.
All right, I just have one comment. Every business does continuous improvement. So the point is what you're saying. I agree. Everybody wants continuous improvement. So I agree with that part. That is something everybody should strive for every day and everything to do, continuous improvement. So with that, we agree. I do agree with the teachers need a shortage, and I do agree with that. I just have concerns with the vagueness. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Hart, just briefly.
Yes.
I think some of the concerns that we've heard from community members regarding some of the principles of the equity policy are concerns over academic standards and concerns over meritocracy being part of or being in contrast with the equity policy. When we're looking at identifying and addressing barriers of achievement gaps, I think we can put into the policy assurances that addressing those achievement gaps, we are not in any way scaling back what we are considered high academic standards that we've had here at Wilson. I think that is a fair balance that certainly could be placed into the policy that would properly address achievement gaps while at the same time not lowering academic standards. To Mrs. Cucker's point, in terms of the issues surrounding recruiting a more diverse background of our staff, again, looking towards that particular goal, I think we can do that, as you indicated, hiring the best candidate for whatever position is available, that we are committed in this particular policy with a goal towards a more diverse group. We are not abandoning the meritocracy that we have put in place, I believe, at Wilson in terms of hiring the best and most highly qualified candidate for a position. So I think these are some of the things that have been addressed and are requested of some balance within this policy to assure we're achieving both of those goals while not abandoning past goals and principles that Wilson has had for many, many years. So to those two particular points, I think those are things that can be added to this policy that creates some balance that some folks have concerns over that we've heard over the last couple of months. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Just briefly as well. I have asked over the course of a couple of meetings now from the administration, and I know Dr. Faley, you sent me some reading, which was great, but I would like to see, other than a couple of the examples that Dr. Kenny sent out, a little bit more how this would be applied year one. Just like in business, if you're going to pitch an idea or pitch a presentation, you should have a little bit more to back up and have that conversation. I did put out a hypothetical question the last meeting with regard to the Jamaica trip, and if there was an extremely bright person within our district that was going to be a future doctor and could not afford the Jamaica trip, would we be footing the bill? And with regard to a couple of the community members with regard to guardrails, my understanding would still be we could put this policy in place and it would cost us nothing day one. We still have a board meeting every other week that we would be still the toll gate on the funds, correct? As far as I know, those are the guardrails, but can you give us a better idea next week or our next board meeting? An idea of what the cost would be year one, possibly year 5, just so we have a better understanding of where this is going. And I think that would put quite a bit of people at ease, our community at ease, and just in general, like some better parameters on where this is headed. I'm all for the equity policy. I'm all for this. This is great. But from a dollars and cents perspective, is this $10 million? Is this $1 million? Is this $250,000? Is it nothing? I mean,
We'll do our best to put that information together.
Thank you.
President Hart.
Yes.
I wanted to follow up also on just looking at the process of creating a committee for this. I mean, hopefully in the near future, as hopefully the policy will pass and we can create a committee around equity, an official committee. And so I was wondering, at the last meeting, I had asked if we could have some clarity around what it takes to create a committee and have one specifically for equity.
Dr. Faley, can we get that in?
I just want to clarify that, are you talking about a committee in addition to the Student Services Committee where this work will be discussed and evaluated under the Student Services Committee report? So are you asking specifically for what is the process to add a committee to the board?
Both. I think we should have some clarity in terms of what the process is, and given that equity is so comprehensive and runs across so much that we do in the district, perhaps entertain the idea of having its own committee.
We can put that information in the board communication that goes out this week, what the process is.
Thank you. Anyone else? Berks Career and Technology Center, Mrs. Casper.
Yes, our last meeting was held at the East Campus on October 27th. And during our Committee of the Whole meeting, we heard a presentation from Mr. Forey, who is one of 4 special education facilitators at BCTC and handles all of the students from Wilson. Wilson also has one of the highest number of students enrolled at BCTC with an IEP. I learned a lot about what our special education facilitators do at BCTC, including the work they do with our parents to make sure that the program their students are enrolled in aligns properly with their career goals. According to Mr. Forey, this process occurs from the very beginning when they receive the list of students after they apply to a program and have an IEP. Upon receiving the list, which by the way, they are currently open for the 2022-2023 enrollment. After receiving the list, Mr. Forey says that they create a skills alignment chart for the student and periodically assess if there are enough modifications for students to be successful in the pursued program. I thought this was interesting given that just the night before, on October 26th, I attended Wilson's Community Forum, which focused on career readiness, and we talked a lot about how we could improve what we do at Wilson to attract students to pursue more programs at BCTC. One of our community members, which spoke today at the forum, suggested something like a skills alignment chart, but even closer to matching students' personalities and interests with their career path. I really liked how these two events matched up with each other for me, and I realized how much really is involved logistically and academically to making sure our BCTC students are successful. Since I mentioned the community forum this past Tuesday, I would like to thank all of our administrators for organizing this event and addressing this very important topic of how to get our students prepared for their future careers. I really enjoyed the opportunity to have discussions with the public around this topic and hope that we can continue this conversation. We also received a BCTC enrollment update for the month of October. Health occupations, welding technology, and sports medicine and rehabilitative therapy are the top 3 enrolled programs. There continues to be a steady upward trend in overall enrollment at BCTC. Student visitation days are back. Interested students can request a tour during the school day beginning this week with their school counselors for either campus. Also, a reminder that open house is scheduled for parents and their students on November 10th at the West Campus and November 11th at the East Campus, both from 5:30 to 8:30. And lastly, BCTC's amazing welding training center was recently recognized by the Greater Reading Chamber Alliance. Our next meeting is Thursday, December 9th at the West Campus, and that's my report.
Thank you. Student Services. Go ahead.
President, I just want to add a couple comments. Oops, I'm sorry. Mr. President, I just add a couple comments. I mean, I attended the forum too, and I thought it was great. However, only 12 people from the community showed up. To me, that's an issue. We can't hang our hat on 12 individuals because, once again, it's not a very representative site. I don't know how to get more people involved, but that discussion was very important because it does talk about career pathways. And I really thought there'd be more people present for that particular conversation because it is important, and I think there's a lot of trades that are offered that we're not taking advantage of, and just leave it go at that.
Thank you. Student Services. Mrs. Casper.
Yes, I don't have a report, but we have our first meeting in a really long time, this coming Wednesday, November the 3rd.
Great, thank you. Berks IU, Dr. Kennedy.
On Tuesday, October 19th, over 400 participants attended the virtual Keeping Kids Safe Symposium to show their continued commitment to keeping the 70,000 students in Berks County safe. The scheduling of this symposium coincided with the America's Safe Schools Week, which was observed from October 17th to the 23rd. The Head Start Family Engagement Team expanded their network of community partnerships to connect low-income families with agencies who allocate their services using the American Rescue Plan funds. They have initiated conversations with a variety of community agencies, obtaining and expanded services and supports for families. On October 11th, the BCIU Office of Professional Development held their annual Common In-Service Day for about 300 Berks County educators. And there is a workshop series, Empathy and Belonging in the Workplace, Grief and Loss, Creating a Supportive Workplace, and Self-Compassion and Resilience. Session 2 will be offered on November 10th and 12th. Session 3 will be offered on December 8th and 10th. Sessions are free to attend for staff members and will be offered at 12 p.m. and 5 p.m. And I'm going to pass off curriculum committee to Mr. Schneider because my own children had well checks, and you know you have to schedule well checks 6 months in advance. So, sorry, couldn't go.
Mr. Schneider?
Yeah, excuse me, we met last Wednesday. We had a presentation about the expansion of the new middle school math curriculum. Piloted last year, is expanding to 6, 7, and 8, and then there are plans to expand it, into Algebra 1 and Geometry, and the summer bridges, which was part of the new structure for middle school. We had a very robust conversation about the Wilson Virtual Academy and the cost savings that it brings to the district. If all the kids that attended the WVA attended a separate cyber charter school, it would cost the district $2,614,540. The cost to the district to implement the program itself is $864,000 and change, giving us a savings of roughly $1.75 million. We talked about what are other ways we could expand it to do even more, make it more robust, and I look forward to those conversations coming up. We talked about a change that really only applies to teachers because it's a switch to how they're evaluated every year, a small switch to the system of their evaluation, moving from something called student learning objectives to something called student performance measures. It actually is a better tool. Then this one was also one I'm pretty excited about. A number of students from the National Merit Scholarship Program want to start an in-house student tutoring service where they would be able to help other students within the district to meet their educational goals. And then lastly, we talked about the third grade field trip. The Old Dry Road Farm, which is typically where they go, is not going to be available this year. So after much searching and going to different places and discussion, it was kind of settled that they would attend the Lehigh Valley Zoo for this year's trip. We did also say that because they haven't been visited in a while, I don't mean the zoo, I mean the field trips, we're going to start looking at what is offered to each grade to see if something new has come up, or we can find something better, or maybe we stick with the one we have for that grade. Thank you.
Thank you. Burke CIT, Mr. Schlossman. Extracurricular, Mrs. Cocker.
Yes, our next meeting is next Monday at noon. Thank you.
Facilities, Mr. Negrini.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. On October 25th, we had a joint Facilities and Finance Committee meeting where we received some updates from Crabtree Rohrbaugh on the Phase 1 High School Performing Arts Center and Renovations Project, as well as the baseball and softball fields project. It's my understanding that a public presentation from those folks will take place at our next board meeting on November 15th. Just as way of background, before the pandemic, this board had engaged in a feasibility study with Crabtree Rohrbaugh on not only potential renovations at the high school and the field project, but also with a potential renovation project, expansion project, or potential new construction of an elementary building. Obviously, when the pandemic took place, all of those items were placed on hold. And then more recently, as decisions were made back in June of this year, the district issued $45 million of general obligation bonds for the potential funding of the Phase 1 high school project. Nothing has been formalized with Phase 2, as I've shared in some communications with community members, initially with the potential renovations and/or new construction as it involved middle school and elementary school. We received a few different options from administration. There was great debate and discussion amongst this board as far as what direction to go in. We asked administration to go back and to provide us with a formalized recommendation that is, I believe, set to take place at our next facilities meeting, December 13th of this year. Nonetheless, at our particular meeting on October the 25th, the Phase 1 Performing Arts Center and renovation project, Crabtree-Rohrbaugh estimated the cost to be $35.7 million. The estimated cost of the Fields project at $5.3 million. And also with the understanding, as Mr. Martin had pointed out, the original $45 million obligation bond was for the potential of land acquisition in the future if that would fall within the parameters of the Phase 2 expansion project. It is expected that if this is moving forward in terms of the Phase 1 project, that board resolution would have to be voted upon on January 18th for bids to go out at the end of January, beginning of February. The bid process would obviously allow for the district to refuse any bids if they come in over estimated budget costs, and for us to reevaluate whether or not we need to scale down some of the renovations of the Phase 1 project. I think it would be extremely helpful. Next meeting, when Crabtree-Rohrbaugh does present this in a public setting. And so that is my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Finance, Mr. Martin.
Well, I have nothing to say. I have nothing to say. Jay pretty much said everything I was going to say. So we will have a joint meeting on December 13th, but we also have our regular December meeting with finance also that month.
Thank you. Legislative, Mr. Martin.
Well, I've been napping here, folks, on the legislative part, but I will, for the next meeting, I will give you a complete update on where we stand with charter schools, PSSB, Pennsylvania School Board Association, sent a letter to the state Department of Education outlining their position on it, and I will give you a full report. And one thing that you probably already read about it is that there will be a court issue on the masking situation coming up. The masks probably go away before it's ever resolved, but there will be a suit against that.
Thank you. Human Resources, no report. Public Relations, Mrs. Troutman.
Thank you. Just have a couple items. First of all, I wanted to let everyone know that we shared our 2021-2022 inclement weather guidelines with our school community last week. Those guidelines are also posted on the district website as a reference. Just another reminder that this Saturday evening, our Wilson High School Junior ROTC will host our annual Veterans Appreciation Dinner Dance from 4 to 10 p.m. in the gym. And tickets can still be purchased in the high school office during the school day or at any Berks County Boscov's department stores. So we again are looking forward to the opportunity to honor our veterans at this wonderful community event. A few of you have already talked about the community forum that was held on Tuesday, October 26th. So I just wanted to again thank all of the community members, board members, and staff that participated in this important conversation. You can find a copy of the PowerPoint presentation from the event on the homepage of our district website. Included in the posted presentation are the slides that we presented that evening, a summary of the comments that were received, and a link to the recording of the event. So we do look forward to continuing this conversation with our community. So we will be sharing a thought exchange with our community in late November to gain additional insight into this important topic. So please be on the lookout for that thought exchange, and we will be sharing it through all district communication. Thank you.
Thank you. Education Foundation, Mr. Case.
Yes, the Education Foundation has not met since the Bulldog Bash, and the next meeting is November 19th at 7:30 in the morning here in this room.
Chip? Thank you. Technology?
I have no report.
Student outreach, Ms. Maddie Sorry, Ms. Maddie Negrini.
Thank you. Recently at the high school, there has been a lot to celebrate regarding the accomplishments of our student body. There have been many recent postseason wins in field hockey, girls soccer, girls volleyball, and the best part about this is that there's a big following of students that have been creating student sections at each of these games and just supporting one another and coming out for these events. Additionally, both the girls and boys cross-country teams competed in the PIAA District 3 Championships this past weekend, with the girls team finishing 8th overall and the boys finishing 18th. Finally, for athletics, the girls water polo team competed in their state championships this weekend and were awarded state runner-up. There's also been a lot happening in the music department. Select and treble choirs had their first concerts of the school year last week, and now moving forward, the band and orchestras are preparing for their upcoming fall concert this Wednesday, November 3rd. Lastly, there are 3 new clubs that have been founded at the high school by high school students. First of them being the Peer Tutoring Club, which is a program in which students can volunteer for National Honor Society hours to help tutor other students their own age. Second being Girls United, a club that is designed to be a safe space for girls and non-binary students to allow discussions about current gender issues in society and just a safe space for these students. Lastly, being a Wilson High School branch of the Letters of Love Global program, which connects students with children who are currently battling illnesses in local hospitals and sending letters of encouragement. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Maravich, we do have non-agenda item participation.
Yeah, I just wanted to address the one issue so that the public realizes. So I just went back and looked at the policies because I know one of the speakers asked about this. With the exception of the equity policy, all these other policies and changes were, I'll say, refer to the term like solicitor driven. So what happens, there's, I don't know, 1,200 policies, something like that. These are policies that either based in a change in the statute, a law, a regulation, or a case where either a recommendation came from our firm or from PSBA that an amendment needed to be made to the policy to address that. So if there's something that came down that specifically said, so for example, 006, which has been referred to before, that change is related to an amendment to the Sunshine Law and how board meetings are supposed to be undertaken. And so that's why some of those changes were made. Like some of the other, you'll see, and you can see in the color changes, you'll see that it's based on a new statute that came down, a new regulation. What does get confusing and is difficult to read is our policies, as all the districts really in Pennsylvania, were in a different format up till a couple of years ago. When Board Docs came out, which obviously is a great product and gives the public a lot more information when you sign on and you can get the whole agenda and click on things and look at old meetings. Before Board Docs, the policies were in a different format. So unfortunately, because of the format change, sometimes the red line makes it look like a lot more is being changed than really is. It's simply a paragraph being moved down one space. So if you really have to look at it to see that it really was all there, it didn't really change, but it's just formatting because unfortunately, when all these 1,200 policies were moved into Board Docs, they didn't necessarily easily translate when you try to amend those to show the changes. So that becomes a little difficult, but that's kind of an explanation of these changes were basically all law-driven, whether it was a statute, a regulation, or a case that was decided. So that just gives some background on how those policies came about and those changes.
Great, thank you. I want to interject here. Mrs. Carroll, I just want to clarify for the community members, board agendas are now made public on the website on Fridays, is that correct?
No, it's actually at Saturday at midnight.
Okay, Saturday at midnight.
It has to be at least 24 hours, so that's more than that 24 hours.
Great. So it is available if people would like to see that before Monday. Thank you. Mr. Maravich?
Mr. President, can we take a 5-minute recess before we get into the public?
5-minute break.
It's up to, thank you. Fritz in session. Is that Mr. Fritz there? Wow.
Okay. Mr. Maravich, will you please start us off with the guidelines for public participation on non-agenda items?
I actually found them on my phone this time, so I won't struggle through them. Rules of public participation at school board meetings pursuant to Sunshine Law, Robert's Rules, and board policy, following are the public rules of participation. Individuals attending the meeting are expected to conduct themselves in a responsible and respectful manner that does not disrupt the meeting. Public comment is not question and answer, but instead is an opportunity to offer comment on matters that are or may come before the board. All comments must be directed to the board as a body and not to individual board members or to administrators. Copying, calling out, or cheering is not permitted, nor conversations in the audience while people are speaking. Individuals may not approach the board tables. Individuals shall make their comments from the speaker's podium. Comments are limited to 3 minutes, and I will provide you with notice at 1 minute. Any person making threatening or personally offensive or impertinent matter or becoming unruly may be removed from the meeting. The above expectations are outlined in Board Policy 903, which is on Board Docs on the district website.
Mrs. Cocker?
Cole Lehman.
Hello, my name is Cole Lehman, and I'm a senior at Wilson. I've been a lifelong student here and have appreciated everything from kindergarten to now. And so I'm just here in support of our teachers, and I just want to thank them for their efforts to better us as students and as people. They come into school every day and work hard through these stressful situations, and we as students think you're doing a great job, and we are with you in your attempts to open our eyes to the world.
Thank you.
Tammy Keener.
Hi, I have this beautiful speech written, and I decided, well, many questions and many statements that were said tonight that maybe I should divert off of this speech. I am Tammy Keener. I am a write-in. I'm running as a write-in, but I'm not running with a pack. I ran a very shoestring-thin campaign. I've been working for the public most of my life. I served my country to keep you free. I've been going across the state for the last 15 years educating people on unions. My thesis in college was about unions and why they're no longer needed. Do you realize that legislation was passed, and perhaps the teachers should hear this, that fair share is no longer needed for unions, that you can now take your union dues and share them with a nonprofit organization. Unions are the ones, the NEA is the one that went to the to the CDC to put these things on our mouths. These don't do anything good, nothing. They're just a muzzle on our faces to control the people. I've been dedicating my life to the public, to the people, to the parents, and to the children. What's going on is ridiculous. 10 years I've been coming in front of this board about this project. In 2017, when it was first proposed, it was 23 million. How did it get up to almost 50 million? We've added a school and 2 schools, a land, 2 more AstroTurf fields, besides a brand new cafeteria and a performing arts center. And might I say that the performing arts center, where I feel it should only have the American flag, has all the flags of all the immigrants that come here. Well, I'm sure that their parents or whoever immigrated here to this wonderful land where you strive to live, they strive to live in, and they fought to get to our country. We all love this as one nation under God. So I'm quite upset now. My father was World War II. He almost didn't come home. I lost 2 uncles in World War II. Hitler did it, and William Goring. I know my history, factual history. Critical race theory is based on theory. There's no facts for it. There's no facts for these masks, and there's certainly no evidence that shows that critical race theory or equity or social emotional learning or gender identity, however you want to label it, is worthy of our children. Our children do not need to be taught this stuff. And 20 years on the board, I think it's time for change. Thank you very kindly. We'll make it at the polls tomorrow.
Thank you.
Tammy Hahn.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Tammy Hahn. I've been teaching in the Wilson School District for 24 years. I'm a resident of the Wilson School District, and currently I'm president of the Wilson Education Association, the teachers union. My two children have had the pleasure of attending Wilson. My oldest, now a sophomore at Penn State, enrolled in computer science and engineering, only possible through the courses that he took here at Wilson. And my youngest is currently a junior in the high school. I consider myself very fortunate to have landed here in the Wilson School District, working with some of the best teachers, teachers working with my children. They are successful young adults because of what they've experienced here. By nature, I'm a pretty quiet and reserved person. Not much riles me, which is good considering I teach in the middle school and there's a lot of things that happen in the middle school. I'm pretty thick-skinned. I can handle just about everything without batting an eye for the most part. However, recently some of my coworkers have been subjected to the spotlight that they didn't ask for. They have been ridiculed and lied about on a public forum, and I too have been attacked, both in email and at 6th grade orientation for the 6th graders, when the kids are supposed to come to school excited about meeting their new teachers. And instead, I had posters hanging up encouraging kindness and acceptance of everybody, and I was accused of pushing an agenda. Apparently, those posters made some people uncomfortable. In a public forum, it was stated that union membership resulted in dangerous situations, and perhaps being union thugs. This person has never even had a conversation with me. Dr. Fadley, you commented on appreciating your professional staff. Thank you. Unfortunately, there were people here shaking their heads no. More so than any other school year in my experience, we need to be kind and accepting of one another. I am so grateful for the work we're doing with the social emotional learning this year. I have a reputation at West as being called Mama Hahn. Kids know they can come talk to me and I'm going to listen. I give guidance if they ask for it. No parent has ever said to me, please don't care about the mental well-being of my child. I'm grateful for all of you sitting before me. I respect you all, and hopefully I have earned your respect as an educator, as I've been the teacher of several of your children. I know your job is not easy, but I admire your determination to do what is right, to stand up for what you believe in, and to always put the children of this school district first. It's for those reasons that the Wilson Education Association is fully endorsing the 4 incumbent candidates for school board, Dr. Amy Kennedy, Steph Cocker, Ed Case, and Sean McCrae. I personally have mailed nearly 1,000 letters announcing our endorsement to PSEA members, active and retired, who reside in the Wilson School District. I've organized our members to be making phone calls tonight, friends of PSEA that are in the school district. It's happening right now. For the record, I am not a thug. I am not pushing in a political agenda, as some have accused me of doing. I'm just a teacher trying to do what is best for children, and in my opinion, what's best for children of the Wilson School District is to have our 4 incumbents remain on the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa Marie Stoneha.
At the last board meeting, a board member disagreed with one of the examples I gave of having an equity policy without guardrails and made the comment that I should read the actual article and not just the headline. Well, I did read several articles, and prior to speaking at the last meeting is when I read them. And I've actually printed them and have them available for you to review. New York City did do away with their gifted program and replaced it with an advanced placement option that starts at 3rd grade. Also included in your materials is information about the difference between gifted and advanced placement, as many often confuse this, but I assure you they are not the same. and I welcome a conversation about this topic. The way that this board member handled this is a great example of why so many of us in the community are fed up with many of you on this board. And she again did it tonight. We are not being heard. This board member missed a key opportunity to have an open conversation, but chose to make fun of a community member instead. Many of us have been coming up to this podium for months with evidence, facts, data, articles, and questions. We have repeatedly asked for meetings, to have conversations, asked for clarity. Instead, we are accused of not being educated. We are told, or we don't believe in science, right? We are told we are wrong, or that we are not the real community. We have told you month after month that we have real concerns, and we would like to discuss these concerns. Asking to be heard does not mean that we are demanding that everything has to go our way. It means we want a respectful and open conversation, and instead, some of you ignored us. In fact, only 2 of you have actually taken us up on an offer to sit down and discuss these concerns. Those of us that stood up here have had their places of employment called. Our kids have been screamed at by community members who disagree with us. Our kids have also been accused of false things and wasting our teachers' time. We've had smear campaigns done against us, and even one of you encouraged the sharing of names and addresses of some of the donors on social media. I'm not sure why this last one shocked me, as what would you expect from the #1 Watcher fan? This is sad, and honestly, it's gotten out of hand. Yet, rather than bringing the community together, you choose to blame many of us, are in shock that we received such a positive response from our campaign. So much so that you took extreme measures to discredit those running against you. We are not the enemy, just as you're not. We all want what's best for our kids. No one is against equity. We just want some guardrails to protect those that are supposed to help. And just because we may not agree with you, doesn't mean it's a conspiracy against you. It means we're different, and that's okay. I don't understand how when we talk about equity, you can understand others are different when it comes to a policy, but when a parent is standing up here, talking to you, asking you to understand, you cannot for a second put yourself in our shoes. Tomorrow, I'm absolutely voting for a change. And my hope is many others do the same. But regardless of what happens tomorrow, things have got to change. Our community is divided, and it's you who have to bring us back together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Randy Blatt.
Hello again. Once again, I don't think you're listening. I won't embarrass anybody on the board. Maybe I will tonight. You are focusing on the equity policy. I heard one of the board members say there were only 12 people that applied from the community, or whatever the number. What was, if you had such a small number, wouldn't you have thought scientifically, and don't say I don't believe in science. Well, she referred to me as not believing in science. I'm an electrical engineer.
Thank you.
If you had a low number from the community, don't you think that if somebody is not aware, they don't care? You should advertise in the newspaper to get more people to come out. Taxpayers, statistically, you're made a mistake. I said that before on the equity policy. All we're looking for is the right number of participations from the community. You still haven't proved to the community that you have an equity issue. That's all we're asking for. You talk about the tax. Somebody said 1/3's good. If I was on the board, I wouldn't say 1/3, the low 1/3 is good at all, especially 5.6%. What'd you do with the COVID money? Where is it? Anyway, that's it. So I'm going to tell you what you should focus on. First thing you should focus on is the superintendent's goals. That's the important thing. The second thing, obvious, improve your communications. You just presented a 006, not 007, 006 policy that a gentleman who I believe him 100% says there's a lot of erroneous stuff in there. And the other thing, again, benchmark those 2 schools that made the top rating and apply that and distribute it to the other schools for improvement. And for goodness sakes, please make sure there's an American flag in all classrooms. And no politics in the classroom. And if you notice, I didn't say a word about politics tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Craig Stoneha.
As always, I'm going to start saying thank you so much for the opportunity to speak tonight. I too wrote something kind of nice, I think, but I'm going to go off script. Some of you may have heard there's an election tomorrow. I don't know, might have been in the paper. I just want to be very, very clear. It doesn't matter. What happens tomorrow is not relevant because the reason there are even contested seats on this board has nothing to do with an election. It's just a symptom. I mean, we have some real problems going on here, and I know a lot of people that are here tonight and people that aren't here tonight have been screaming to be heard. And really, that's what's going on. The parents in this, not all of them, but a lot of parents have some very real concerns, and they're trying desperately to communicate that. And maybe at times we don't always do the best job. I mean, I know I can always get better as well, but we consistently feel like there is a communication gap here. And I know it's come up a couple of times, last couple of people have mentioned it. Communication is a huge problem. I can't tell you how many times we feel like we're reaching out and we hear nothing back, or we get a form letter. I mean, you guys have to understand, you have all the power here. All the power. You guys are our leadership. So most of what has happened over the last year from a parental response standpoint has all been in response to things that you have said or done. I mean, we were told that we were a small, insignificant group, so we went out and found more people. That was a response. I mean, I don't know what else. Race-based education wasn't present, so people went out and started looking for evidence. We were told that it's easy to speak out when you're not willing to take on the risk of sitting where you're sitting, so some of us ran. We're constantly responding to the comments from you guys because you are our leaders. And it's important that we make sure we don't forget that. I mean, comments that were made tonight insulting certain members of the community, that's terrible. That's not leadership. That shouldn't happen. Okay. And so there is a real feeling, and whether it's real or not, there's a perceived, or it's a perception, of shattered faith between the community and this board, of a lack of trust. And these are not things that are easily fixed, and the repair has to come from you guys, from the leadership that is this board. We can't repair that. We can't make the people of this community trust that the board has their best interests and their kids' best interests at heart. We need to see that you guys want to talk to us, that you guys want to be engaged on the topics that we care about. Whether or not you agree with them is not necessarily relevant. It needs to be shown that you're willing to have that conversation and that concerns out in the community are taken seriously. So I implore you, this is a cry for unity. It doesn't matter what happens tomorrow. What matters is that maybe, just maybe, enough people have stood up that we've gotten a point across that there needs to be more communication, there needs to be more bringing together of this community. That's all I've got. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Brian Shavinsky.
Good evening. I'd like to start out by saying I'm not the WSBS watcher on Facebook, which I think some people believe. As Craig said, there is an election tomorrow. A school board election is pretty much the most local of all local elections. We should all vote to re-elect our incumbents back to the Wilson School Board. I have 10 simple reasons why. 1, they are former Wilson teachers, parents, and community members with experience in education and business, working for all our students and staff. 2, they've led Wilson District to rank number 51 out of 711 MPA high schools. 3, they fought to keep schools open with masks and to keep our kids safe during this pandemic and continue to do so. 4, wisely have invested in our schools long-term while also maintaining one of the lowest tax rates in Berks County. 5, supported town halls, surveys, and roundtables to engage Wilson community with transparency. If the community does not show up, that is not on the school board. 6, dedicated to providing all students with an award-winning education. 7, they took the time to be part of our local primaries this past May. Our community voted and selected these 4 out of 7 to be on the ballot tomorrow. Kennedy, Cocker, McCrae, and Case have never received any support from a national PAC, coordinated or otherwise. They have never received a 5-digit donation from any PAC. They have demonstrated that experience does matter and is valued by our community. Now, later, tonight, and tomorrow, talk to your friends, family, and neighbors. Make sure that they let their voice be heard at the ballot box and vote tomorrow. Keep our school board under local control. Vote local. Vote to re-elect.
1 minute.
Dr. Amy Kennedy, Steph Cocker, Sean, Mr. McCray, Ed Case, back to our Wilson School Board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim Fick.
Act like the kids and see this. So I'm going to change it up. I'm going to thank all of you, not just for the time, but I'm here to talk about Camp Sotara and a field trip and how you guys and Dr. Fadley, Dr. Trickett, Dr. Cachufo, Dr. Hoffert made a decision in the best interests of our students, which is what you do consistently, and you allowed us to go on a field trip and take our 6th graders up to Camp Sotara from West and Southern, allowed us to take the 7th graders up now, so that the 6th graders that missed out on that opportunity last year, and you did it in the best interest of the kids and the community. Many of you know I feel strongly about this trip, educationally, socially. It's one of the most valuable experiences we have in the middle school program. Hopefully we can keep that middle school program going. And I know hopefully next year we can continue it in the way it's always been traditionally held, 2.5 days to being able to have the kids stay overnight. But it is something that I felt strongly about. I wanted to thank you for your vision on that and just allowing us to continue that trip because it is one of the most valuable experiences we have. We have high school kids that apply. We have to turn them away. We have too many kids that sign up to come back and help us out. So it is an amazing, amazing experience for our kids. And I thank you. And I know I'm not supposed to address anybody specifically at the board, so anybody up there that was in a state championship this weekend, congratulations on a great season.
Thank you.
Steph Janakovo.
Mine will be very brief. I wanted to talk about the finance that you went over, so thank you for going over that. You answered a lot of my questions. I just do implore that you guys sit there and think about the overcrowding that we have in the elementary schools, and please maybe cut back on some other things that might not be needed right now. I know you're going to have them come back out and go over their new the new figures and everything else. So hopefully if it does increase, which I'm sure it did because of all the cost of everything that's going on, that you do take into consideration that these teachers are overstaffed, these teachers are overcrowded with these kids. It's not fair to these students who either need to have teachers slow down or speed up. My kid has dealt with some of that in the past, so I know it can affect them. And you guys are wanting to make it best for the teachers and the students, so just please keep in mind that maybe cut back on some of the things right now. Athletic fields, we do need it. I'm not saying that we don't, but just see which is more important. So thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff Shinakovo?
So if equity is to be the foundation of everything that goes forward from next meeting and on, I'm not sure how that happens here without addressing the institutional inequities I highlighted last meeting. It would be really interesting to see how we adopt a policy in light of those things we've got going on. It would make more sense to me, and most that I talk to, that we'd fix those first. Lunches. We've had 18 months of federally subsidized lunches. This goes to the question about costs and guardrails and accountability of what this policy is going to be. We've been told that students who are on subsidized or free lunch, and I was one of those students in high school, are disproportionately not excelling in education. I've asked the question simply, in 18 months of having the federal government pay for lunches for students 2 meals a day, 5 days a week, have we seen anything improve? That question's been deemed as inflammatory, and that's why some in this community are upset. That's a very simple, reasonable question. It's not taxpayer money I'm asking about. It's what, I mean, I guess it comes from the federal government, so it is, but it's not directly our community's money. But we can't even get a straight answer on that. Just simply asking that question. What's improved? It's been told that food scarcity is an issue. 18 months it's been paid for. What's been the improvement? No answer. That's not inflammatory. That's a simple question. We've been told that students fail because there's not a teacher that looks like them at the front of the room. Your own data from 2016 shows that 9.4% of all students at Wilson are in AP courses. Asian students are over that number at 16.3%. That's a pretty big jump. But yet, I'm not sure that we have that many Asian students or Asian teachers at the front of the room. So what does that really mean? Does it really mean that we need these teachers to properly represent, or is there something else there? And let's talk about the bullying policy, because this one's most interesting, and it kind of dovetails into equity. So I've got some emails, and I don't know how a policy is built. I don't know how cohesive leadership is found when one administrator emails to another. They formed a racial equity oversight committee in January that has students, staffs, parents, and community members participating. Here's the current policy I found. Maybe less is more. The response from the administrator in question here, it was adopted in 1983, so ... Dismissive. Another administrator declined an invite to a meeting simply because they were out of the office. And the response there was, clearly equity is not a chief concern of yours. Thanks for letting me know. Subsequent follow-up was, hey, I won't be there because I declined. The response was, yeah, I know how you feel about equity at Wilson. Time for a leadership change, and that's what tomorrow's about.
Thank you.
President Hart, would I be able to answer one of Mr. Jacobo's questions, just the first part?
You may.
And if Dr. Fadley, if it's not correct, I'm pretty sure I have the background on this. So the question about the free and reduced lunch is not about the fact that students that are considered free and reduced are getting free lunch. The reason students are free and reduced in that category is because they have the income with which their families earn each year. So if our population of students who are free and reduced lunch come from lower income backgrounds, that's why they are statistically more at risk and perform, and statistically, this is not every single student, but statistically perform lower than students who would be above that salary base. I think it's close to, for a family of four, $50,000 a year. So that's to put it into some perspective. It has nothing to do with the fact that all students have been getting free lunch all year, because those students in that category still come from families of low income. Michael Fitzgerald.
Hello, my name is Michael Fitzgerald. I've been a teacher in this district for 33 years, so I have somewhat of a long view. And while I am a teacher here, I do believe it's important for the district to own up to and accept some hard facts. The teachers, administrators, and school board members here at Wilson bear direct responsibility for what's been happening in this district lately. I'd like to provide some examples. You're responsible for creating an atmosphere where we're able to enjoy rankings in the top 10% from organizations like U.S. News and World Report, Forbes magazine, and others. You're the reason that we prepare students best for college, as per U.S. News and World Report, why we rank in the top 10% nationally and in the state in terms of our education in Pennsylvania. Other people provided statistics earlier, I don't need to repeat, but an organization provided a scorecard of a rating of 91.67% for how Wilson compares to other school districts. So yes, teachers, administrators, school board members, you're responsible for providing first-class academic programs that engage students in music, drama, the arts, sciences, math, engineering, technology, humanities, and more. You're responsible for a first-rate athletic program that teaches young men and women the importance of teamwork and a shared vision. You're responsible for creating a school district with a reputation that families seek out when buying homes in this area, and one that real estate agents use as a selling point for prospective buyers. You've created a climate of excellence and reputation second to none. Is there room for improvement in this district? Always. Which is why anyone involved with this district learns pretty quickly that the pursuit of excellence is the standard we try to live up to every day, and at the same time, a never-ending journey. A few notes about my personal interaction with some board members. I've been involved with the union as chief negotiator for several years. In 15 years, I've had the opportunity to work with a number of board members, and some of those interactions have been tense, to say the least. But yet I've never had cause to doubt their commitment to the children and families they serve. They didn't run for election because of a hot-button issue or two, or because they wanted to impose their viewpoint and perspective on others. In my experience, most of them got involved for the right reasons: to listen, to govern objectively, and not be swayed by passing winds, hyperbole, or because they have an axe to grind. So with the election tomorrow, we have a choice. Do we continue to follow the path charted for us long ago, the one that seeks continual improvement and betterment, and one that produces stellar results even as we strive to do better? Or do we change the direction to cater to individuals who first and foremost want to impose what I believe are misguided beliefs and viewpoints on the children and families in our district? I'm reminded of an old adage, apologies to my English and language teacher colleagues, but if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it.
David Weimer.
Good evening. What I wanted to do is just talk tonight about finances and as a taxpayer. So I have my taxpayer hat on. I've been quiet and I've listened for the last few meetings about the operationalizing and the operations aspect with equity, but that's squarely in your court. You know, I don't envy you in terms of trying to operationalize it. I think you've got a lot of challenges ahead. And as it's written, I think that, you know, those challenges are going to significantly change the way that you're going to be able to address certain things. So again, I'll stay out of your knickers when it comes to the operations aspect. But I do want you to be tough on a problem, and on that problem, we can certainly be easy on people. And that problem is, where's the money coming from? Money usually follows policy. So I've actually been encouraged tonight because I've heard these echoes of questions that I'm going to ask. What is the cost to the district of a district-wide equity audit or a feasibility study from a third-party consultant? I would think before you institute a policy, you got to figure out what's it going to cost you to operationalize and implement that policy. But I've seen nothing tied from a line item accounting or even a budget or even a forecast for a policy that's supposedly going into place. What are the expected annual costs of maintenance of the policy? What are some of the possible unintended consequences from a financial standpoint of instituting the policy? And I think that, you know, we've had a lot of discussion about the operationalizing it, and I really would like, from a taxpayer perspective, that we spend the respectful and due time on the finances and what is it going to actually cost, because in the end, that's what we as taxpayers are all paying for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Megan Epler.
Good evening. I just wanted to kind of reiterate some things that have been said a little earlier. We want unity from you guys. We have talked numerous times. People have spoke up. We want to work with you. That was never the case, and I felt like we never got any feedback. We never got anything from you. So this is how we got to this point. You also still have the ability to help with your followers, still be united with us. I personally had my kids attacked during this campaign, as well as my place of employment. And someone made a remark about how we're not able to communicate. I went up to someone in this room after one of the meetings just to try to, extend an olive branch, because I did not want an issue, especially with my employer. And instead, hands were waved in my face and I got yelled at. These are people who support you. If you could tell them to maybe be a little more mature, we're all adults in this room. There's no reason we can't work together to solve these problems that we have asked about numerous times. It really is not that hard. A simple email, a simple video that you could put out there, anything that you could give us, that's all we asked for. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
President Hart, that's all the papers I have.
Thank you, Mrs. Cocker. Any other business before the board? Mr. Martin?
Yeah.
Thank you. One thing that bothers me most about the last few weeks is, for some reason, the teachers became the focal point of discussions. I don't quite understand that, because I believe 98% of the teachers outperform other school districts in every aspect. So how we got into this, brought the teachers into the situation, I really don't know, and I don't really understand, but I don't like it. The teachers do a tremendous job, but we seem to be wavering off that path. I don't know if it's, I don't know how we got to that point, but I don't believe it's appropriate. at this point in time. Like I said, I'm not worried about the 98%, I'm just worried about the 2%, which creates some issues here. And I don't know how things, I guess when I speak now, I don't speak in really clear English, but what I was doing when I was talking, I was actually complimenting our administrating staff for doing a job well done. I think they have the ability to manage this process, not be forced with guidelines and rules that they have to adhere to. So I don't know how that got lost in translation, but it did. So hopefully I cleared that part of it up. I don't like to be called a liar. Got vocal with Brad, and I spoke to him at halftime. There was some confusion on his part and my part, and I don't believe it was meant to be that way, but I'm very honest and very straightforward. I'm a straight shooter. And when somebody thinks, well, I thought he called me a liar, so we got into a situation which wasn't very good for either party. Somebody said about overcrowded schools. I've yet to see any reports showing the overcrowded. We address those issues where needed. So I'm not sure where that's coming from. So I'm asking the administration to put a report together for each of the class sizes, so at least I can better understand that. The school board, most people don't, I think maybe most people do, maybe don't, but your school board is as somebody mentioned, is your most basic form of government, yet it controls your students or people more than any other government. More than Pennsylvania government, more than the federal government. In fact, excuse me, a family that has a modest home about $150,000 and makes $80,000 a year pays more in education taxes than they do in federal taxes. But the real point is the school boards throughout the United States, we should just address here, have more influence on your sons and your rights than the other thing. So we talked about the election. I personally think we should transform to a republic-type approach where every person has a vote versus what we have a turnout. We could have like 12% turnout tomorrow and maybe 8% rules. So we don't do a good job in that. And if you're familiar with republic types of government, New England has quite a few where the people vote together as a group, not necessarily a few people on the electronic. But get out and vote. I'm not saying not to vote, but what I'm trying to say is we don't vote enough. I mean, even the last presidential election, I think was it 52%? And then, so you divide that by 2 because it was so close. That means 26% of the population dictates the outcome. So go out and vote what you believe is best interest for meeting your objectives. I'm skipping over that. I've heard some comparisons lately, how we're rewriting history, and one comparison was that somebody tried to compare the Holocaust, internment camps, death camps, to what happened to the Japanese during World War II in California. Well, I can speak from experience. My mom was a teenager in California when Pearl Harbor happened. Everybody was scared in California. The government chose a policy of removing what they considered maybe hostile people and put them in internment camps. They were well fed, they were educated, everything was above board. Now we have people 75 years from that date trying to walk in my mom's shoes, trying to tell me that these camps were related to, on the same par as the Holocaust. So this is where problems exist. You can't have it this way. You gotta keep moving forward. We gotta move forward. History should be taught. Everything should be taught. Jim Crow laws, everything. The Civil War battle in, was it Summit Heights, where the black soldiers went in and they pretty much lost the whole regiment. That should be taught. I know about this stuff, and I think maybe more people know it than not, but that should be taught. But don't reflect on that and try to look at today's society and say how to fix something like that. You don't fix it. It comes from your heart. Your heart fixes things. I was in a partnership, and we had many homes in the city of Reading, and I was working in a house, and I know prejudice doesn't exist at birth. It has to be coming from somewhere. But I was working downstairs remodeling, I think the basement, and a young black child comes up to me, maybe he's 3 or 4 years old, and he asked me, "Can I be your daddy?" Now, that kind of hit home, so I sat down and talked with that child. And you know, I don't know where that child is today, but that comes from the heart. Rules and regulations, books and government laws don't make things happen. It's you as an individual, and I hope you keep that in your heart when you see things like that. Make it so. Don't rely on somebody telling you to do so. Thank you.
Any other business before the board?
President Hart, I just wanted to end on a positive note. Mr. Fick kind of stole a little bit of my thunder, but I wanted to take a moment to thank our district leadership and our middle school teachers and administrators for their role in making sure that Camp Swatara visits happened this year for our middle school 6th and 7th graders. I had the pleasure of visiting the camp during a stormy, windy, and very swampy afternoon this past Tuesday, October 26th. I witnessed teachers, high school volunteers, and excited and curious middle schoolers being blown across a lake in canoes by the heavy wind, but enjoying every minute of it as they worked collaboratively to paddle their way across to the other side of the lake. I literally thought that Mrs. Barenhausen, a 7th grade reading teacher at West, was a camp employee expert at canoeing and boating as I witnessed the care she took with explaining the rules for students to enter and exit their canoes. Mr. Rada also gave me a quick tour of some of the stations that the teachers and staff had set up for the students, including a science activity led by Mrs. Fox, where students got the opportunity to explore critters from the passing stream at the camp. Many of the teachers had to improvise due to the weather, but I never saw students lack engagement. I was struck by how seamlessly the students and the teachers were able to work together. This is exactly what the whole child approach to teaching and learning looks like. I have a 7th grader who participated with the red team last Tuesday, and after I picked her up that night, she could not stop talking about how much fun she had with her friends. But I think what struck me the most is that she talked about her teachers as if they were one of her classmates. This was truly a unique opportunity for our students to bond with our amazing teachers that you just can't duplicate in the classroom. I hope that we can continue to provide opportunities like this for our students as they transition into middle school. And thank you again for making this trip possible.
Any other comments or business before the board? Looking for a motion to adjourn?
Schneider, so moved.
Schneider first. Do we have a second? Mr. Martin.